Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. Imagine for a second that you just engineered like a perfect life-saving water system.
Right.
You've got the technology totally dialed in, the water is crystal clear, and you roll it out to a community that desperately needs it.
Sounds like a huge win.
Yeah, exactly. But then, a few months later, you realize almost nobody is actually using it.
Oh, wow.
Right. And why? Because the 5-gallon jug you provided to carry the water is, well, it's completely unliftable for the people who are actually doing the daily chores.
Yeah.
So you built the right technology, but you solved, the wrong human problem.
Which happens way more often than people think.
All the time. So today's deep dive is pulling from a really comprehensive guide by Felix Römer. It's called Design Thinking in Business, a framework for creative problem solving.
Yeah, and it's such a great resource.
It really is. So we are approaching this as two industry insiders just kind of unpacking a highly strategic resource for modern professionals.
Yeah. Right, because our mission today is to extract the exact methods and, the mindsets that help businesses turn raw insights into actionable, risk-free solutions.
Exactly. So whether you are a product manager, a business leader, or just someone trying to solve, stubborn workflow problems without feeling completely overwhelmed, this discussion is going to equip you with a really practical toolkit for the future of work.
Yeah, it really operates as a survival guide for the modern business landscape.
For sure.
Because, we are living in an era where markets move at absolute lightning speed.
Yeah, you can't afford to be slow.
Right. And if you're relying on guesswork, or worse, if you were just building things because a few executives in some isolated conference room thought it sounded like a good idea.
Oh, the classic mahogany table brainstorming session.
Exactly. You are taking on a massive amount of unnecessary risk. This whole framework is about how to test ideas incredibly fast and reduce that risk by getting real user feedback before you spend, a single dime on heavy development.
Okay, but I think we need to clear the air right away. Yeah.
Because we hear the term design thinking thrown around in corporate buzzword bingo constantly.
Totally. It's everywhere.
Right. People hear it and they immediately picture like beanbag chairs, sticky notes on a glass wall, and maybe picking the right color palette for a new app.
Yeah, people think it's just about making things look pretty.
Exactly. But that is completely missing the point.
It's a massive misconception. Design thinking isn't about aesthetics at all. It is fundamentally a human-centered approach to innovation.
Right.
It's a methodology that relies on deep observation and rapid prototyping, rather than getting stuck in, analysis paralysis.
So less debating, more doing.
Exactly. Instead of sitting around that mahogany table debating what customers might possibly want, you go out into the real world.
Yeah.
You observe how people behave, you build a quick, scrappy, almost embarrassing version of your idea, and you put it in their hands.
I love that. Almost embarrassing.
Right. You let the real world tell you if you are on the right track, rather than relying on your own internal biases. And the origins of this are fascinating because it didn't start in a traditional corporate strategy meeting.
No, not at all.
This goes back to IDEO in the 1990s and figures like David Kelly and Tim Brown.
That's right. And their influence essentially rewired how Silicon Valley and eventually the rest of the world thought about problem solving.
Because they started with physical things, right?
Yeah, IDEO originally focused on crafting physical products. They designed the first manufacturable mouse for Apple, for instance.
Oh, wow, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were phenomenal at making tangible things. But around the early 2000s, they realized that the exact same iterative process they used to design a physical computer mouse could be applied to broader, highly complex systems.
Right. They transitioned from just designing a product to designing like an organization or a service or a complete customer journey.
Exactly. Tim Brown really championed this specific intersection where you overlap what people actually need, what is technically possible, and what makes business sense.
And then David Kelly took these very practical methods out of the exclusive design studio and brought them into the academic world, right? At the Stanford D.school.
Yes, which was a huge shift.
Because by doing that, he made these tools accessible to people across all different roles. Suddenly, you didn't have to be a trained industrial designer to use design thinking.
Right, you could be a supply chain manager or an HR director.
I just love that specific shift from the physical product to the entire holistic experience.
Yeah, it changes everything.
It makes me think of an analogy, like the old traditional way of design is like just designing a beautiful ceramic coffee cup.
Okay.
You make sure the handle is perfectly ergonomic, the glaze is flawless, it retains heat, and your job is done.
Right, you made a great cup.
But design thinking is like designing the entire morning routine. You aren't just looking at the cup. You are thinking about the friction of the ordering process on the mobile app, the flow of the physical line in the cafe so people don't bump into each other.
Well, ecosystem.
Exactly. The tempo of the music, the vibe of the barista. You are designing an ecosystem so that the customer has an absolutely flawless morning. The cup itself is just one tiny interchangeable piece of a much larger puzzle.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it.
Thanks.
Because if that coffee cup is a work of art, but the customer had to wait 20 minutes in a confusing, frustrating line to get it,
The experience is completely ruined.
totally broken. The business fails no matter how good the product is. And that is exactly why this methodology matters so much today.
Yeah.
In a fast-changing market, the competitive edge always goes to the company that can explore, learn, and iterate the fastest.
Because otherwise you just build things nobody wants.
Right. Design thinking prevents companies from building bloated, incredibly expensive features based purely on internal assumptions. It forces you to validate those assumptions early and often.
So how do we actually execute this?
Well, there are some frameworks.
Right. The text breaks down some core principles and refers to them as the 3 lenses of innovation. If you are going to build anything, you have to look through these 3 lenses. The very first one, and the guide heavily emphasizes that this must always come first, is desirability.
Always first.
Basically, do people actually want this?
It sounds almost laughably obvious, right? Do people want it?
You would think so.
But if you look at the landscape of failed startups or discontinued corporate products, you would be shocked by how many companies start with the technology just because they know how to build it.
Oh, absolutely.
They build a brilliant solution looking for a problem.
Yeah.
Desirability asks, who benefits from this and why do they care? You have to interview actual users, map their unmet needs, and surface the emotional value of what you're offering.
Because if you skip this phase...
If you skip it, you risk perfectly executing a flawless solution for a problem that nobody in the real world actually cares about.
Which is the ultimate nightmare.
Yeah.
Spending 2 years and millions of dollars to just launch to crickets.
Exactly.
Okay, so once we actually validate that people want this thing, the second lens is feasibility. Meaning, can we actually build this with the technology and resources we have? But I want to push back here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
In my experience, if you bring an engineering or operations team in too early and ask, hey, can we build this crazy idea? They are just going to look at their current server architecture and say, no, impossible.
Yeah, that's a very common reaction.
Right. Doesn't the feasibility lens risk assassinating good ideas before they even get off the ground?
That is a very real danger, and it's a critical point to clarify. Feasibility is about checking the technical or operational fit, yes.
Right.
But if you just hand a wild, visionary concept to an engineering team and ask a binary question like, is this possible? The easiest answer for them is no.
Because it's a headache for them.
Exactly. It's outside the current specs. It's too hard. It ruins the roadmap. The key to the feasibility lens in design thinking is bringing engineers in to adapt the scope, not to kill the concept up front.
Oh, I see. So you are treating them as co-creators, not gatekeepers.
Exactly. You use their deep technical expertise to figure out how to make a scrappy, functional version of the idea work.
Yeah.
You ask them, what would need to be true for us to build a version of this? You leverage their knowledge to find creative technical workarounds, rather than letting technical constraints shut down the creative process entirely.
I love that framing. Use engineers to adapt, not assassinate.
Exactly.
And then the third lens is viability. Will this actually sustain the business?
Right. It verifies whether this solution can financially sustain itself over time. Does it generate revenue? Does it create massive cost savings?
So I guess if you're a nonprofit.
Yeah, if you're operating in a nonprofit or government context, does it align with mission-based funding?
Right.
The magic happens when you balance all 3. Desirability, feasibility, and viability. If you create a simple 3-lens scorecard for your team's ideas, your whole organization can objectively compare options and move forward together without getting bogged down in endless subjective arguments.
Okay, so those 3 lenses give us the underlying criteria for a good idea. But what does the actual day-to-day work look like?
Well, the guide details the D.School's famous 5 phases.
Right. Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. But there is a huge caveat here, isn't there?
A very big one.
This process is intentionally messy. It is a looping, iterative process. It is not a clean, straight line from step 1 to step 5.
It absolutely has to be messy because human behavior is inherently messy.
Yeah, we aren't predictable.
Exactly. You're dealing with people, not predictable machines. But these 5 phases give you clear, distinct modes for your team's work. First, you empathize.
Which means?
You don't just ask people what they want, you observe them. You research their real, lived constraints.
Because what people say they do and what they actually do are often two entirely different things.
Precisely. Then you move to define. This is often the hardest part. You have to synthesize all that messy research into a single, sharp problem statement.
Right, because if you define the wrong problem, every step after this is just wasted effort.
Exactly. Third is ideate. This is where you use divergent thinking. You are pushing for a massive quantity of ideas. Good ones, bad ones, impossible ones.
Just throw it all at the wall.
Right, because quantity frees up creativity. You turn off the critical part of your brain for a moment.
And then comes my favorite part. Prototype and test.
Oh, yeah.
This is about making those abstract ideas tangible so you can learn fast. You build it out of cardboard if you have to, and you see how people interact with it.
Literally cardboard and tape sometimes.
But while the D.School's 5 phases are the most famous, we should talk about how flexible this mindset is. The source material outlines a few alternative frameworks, too.
Yeah, there are a few.
There's IDEO's Inspire, Ideate, Implement, which condenses things into a really tight 3-step loop. And then there's the double diamond approach, which I find fascinating because it visualizes a specific rhythm.
The double diamond is a brilliant mental model. It represents 2 phases of diverging and converging.
How does that work in practice?
Well, first, you diverge to deeply explore the problem, opening up your mind to all the context. Then you converge to define exactly what the core issue is. That's the first diamond.
Okay.
Then you diverge again to brainstorm 100 possible solutions. Finally, you converge a second time to narrow down and prototype the single best answer.
It builds a natural breathing rhythm into the innovation process.
Right.
Expand your options, then make a decision.
Exactly. Expand and contract.
And then there's AIGA's head, heart, and hand framework, which balances the strategic thinking of the head, the deep empathy of the heart, and the tangible execution of the hand.
It just goes to show that you don't have to be dogmatic about the specific steps.
Yeah, completely.
All of these frameworks share the exact same DNA. They're just different structural tools to manage the messiness of innovation.
You just pick the model that fits your team.
Right, you fit it to your specific tempo and culture. The ultimate goal is always exactly the same. Move from deep research to tangible action without getting permanently stuck in a boardroom debate.
Okay, I have to pause this here because I am listening to this, and I can practically hear the software developers and project managers in our audience screaming at their devices right now.
I know exactly what they're saying.
Right. The natural pushback here is, hold on, isn't this just agile?
Yeah.
I mean, my teams are already running Jira boards. We do 2-week sprints. We iterate constantly, and we ship MVPs. Why on earth would we add another complex framework on top of what we were already doing?
It is the single most common pushback you hear in the corporate world, and it is vital to untangle. The short answer is they do not conflict at all.
Really?
They are completely complementary, but you have to understand the dividing line. Here is the crucial difference. Design thinking is fundamentally for discovery, and agile is fundamentally for delivery.
Discovery versus delivery. Let's unpack the mechanics of that.
Think about it this way. Design thinking is the tool you use to explore the chaotic unknown to find the right problem to solve. You are figuring out what to build and verifying that anyone actually wants it. Agile takes that validated solution and iterates through highly structured, sprint-based execution to actually ship the working software.
So Agile is figuring out how to build it as efficiently as possible.
Yes.
So if you don't use design thinking first, you might use Agile to very quickly, efficiently, and beautifully build a product that absolutely nobody wants to buy.
Exactly. You use design thinking to validate the problem space and prove the desirability before you commit your incredibly expensive heavy sprint capacity to delivering the final code.
That makes so much sense.
Design thinking points the ship in the right direction. Agile is the engine that gets you there fast.
That clarifies so much. Now, as we expand into the bigger picture, the source material introduces systems thinking, which honestly gave me a huge aha moment.
It's a great concept.
It talks about the iceberg model. Let's explain how this actually works.
The iceberg model is an essential mental framework for anyone trying to create lasting structural change, rather than just temporary fixes. We all know that with a literal iceberg, Only about 10% is visible above the water, right?
Right.
The massive 90% that actually dictates how the iceberg moves is hidden beneath the surface. In business, the visible tip of the iceberg is an event, say, a sudden spike in customer complaints or a server crashing.
And our natural instinct is to just react to the tip. We put out the fire, we appease the angry customer, we reboot the server.
Right. But if you just react to the visible event, you are just applying a Band-Aid. The problem will inevitably return. Systems thinking pushes you to look beneath the waterline.
What's down there?
Just below the surface are the patterns. Has this happened every quarter?
Yeah.
Below that are the underlying structures. What are the rigid corporate policies or supply chain bottlenecks causing this?
Oh, wow.
And at the very bottom are the mental models. What are the deep-seated beliefs or cultural norms in our company that allow this broken structure to exist?
The text provides some incredible real-world stories that perfectly illustrate the profound danger of ignoring that underwater part of the iceberg and the incredible success that happens when you actually pay attention to it.
Yes, the case studies are amazing.
Let's go back to the story I teased at the very beginning, the story of Shanti and the Safe Water Initiative.
This is a classic, heartbreaking example of a brilliant technological solution completely missing the human system. A well-funded project was launched to provide safer, clean water to a rural community.
And the water was good, right?
The product itself, the purified water, was exceptional. But the delivery system required the locals to purchase and carry a standard 5-gallon jerry can. For Shanti, and many women like her, this full container weighed over 40 pounds.
Which is incredibly heavy.
It was simply too heavy to carry back and forth while managing her other daily chores.
Not only was it physically unmanageable, but the water treatment plant's opening hours and their purchase minimums completely clashed with her daily routine and her cash flow. So the product was a technical triumph. It was perfectly clean water. But the initiative failed entirely because the service rules completely ignore the structural reality of her life.
The desirability lens was entirely missing. The engineers solved for the water, but they didn't observe the context of the user.
Are there other examples of this?
Yeah, another powerful example is the mass distribution of mosquito nets in Africa to prevent malaria. On paper, it makes perfect sense.
Right, just give people nets.
But mass distribution, while somewhat successful in reducing the disease, totally missed huge groups of vulnerable people.
Why did it miss them?
Because the logistics, the local distribution channels, and the community incentives weren't aligned with the physical product. It proves that having a good product is never enough. The surrounding system has to be designed just as carefully as the artifact itself.
But then we have a story that shows what happens when you get this right. The concept of positive deviance in Vietnam.
Oh, this is my favorite one.
I want to spend some time on this because it's brilliant.
This is one of the most powerful examples of design thinking in action, even though it wasn't formally called that at the time. There was a massive systemic issue with childhood malnutrition in rural villages.
Right.
The traditional top-down approach would be for outsiders to come in with assumptions, likely proposing complex, expensive nutritional supplements or massive structural overhauls.
But instead of looking at the broken system, they looked for the anomalies. They looked for local families who were just as exceptionally poor as their neighbors, but whose children were somehow perfectly healthy.
Exactly. They looked for the positive deviance.
And what did they find?
Well, by deeply observing these specific families, what they found was shockingly simple. These parents were doing something slightly different. They were gathering tiny shrimp and small greens, things that were totally free and readily available in local rice paddies, and adding them to their children's rice.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, they were shifting from feeding them 2 large meals to smaller, more frequent meals.
So they didn't need a billion-dollar intervention. The solution already existed inside the community.
Exactly. And by testing and scaling that incredibly simple, locally sourced behavior shift, having the community teach each other to cook this way, they helped 80% of 1,000 children drastically improve their nutrition within a single year.
That is amazing.
It proves that hyperlocal insights, tested collaboratively with the people who actually live the problem, will almost always beat arrogant outsider assumptions.
So we've covered the methodology, the distinction from agile, and the underlying systems. Let's talk about why this matters on a highly practical level, starting with the business itself. What happens to a company when they actually adopt this?
Structurally, it builds what we call a true learning culture. When an organization stops relying on long, expensive, sterile focus groups and instead starts running rapid, scrappy experiments in the real world, they generate incredible data.
Right.
When you capture those insights and store them in a shared central repository, the entire organization gets smarter by the day. You fundamentally de-risk executive decisions.
And you stop fighting the same fires over and over.
Because you are using that iceberg model to identify deep leverage points, you actually cure the disease rather than endlessly treating the returning symptoms.
But I also want to pivot to what this means for the individual. For you, the person listening to this deep dive right now who wants to future-proof your career.
It's hugely important for individuals.
There is a concept highlighted in the text about becoming a T-shaped professional, and I think it is the most actionable career advice I've heard in a long time. Let's break down the mechanics of the T.
It is highly relevant to today's incredibly competitive job market. Advancing your career today rarely means just getting better at your one specific task.
Right.
A T-shaped professional represents two dimensions of skills. The vertical line of the T represents your deep, specialized expertise in one specific area. Maybe you are a brilliant Python coder, or a meticulous financial analyst, or a razor-sharp copywriter. You need that depth to be useful.
But the vertical line isn't enough anymore, is it? You need the horizontal bar across the top.
Precisely. The horizontal line represents a broad base of boundary-crossing skills. Things like radical empathy, cross-departmental communication, and the ability to learn rapidly outside your domain.
And how does design thinking fit into that?
Design thinking is essentially a boot camp for developing that horizontal bar. It forces you out of your silo to collaborate with people who process the world entirely differently than you do.
So instead of just being like the database person who throws data over the wall to marketing, you become the person who can actively sit down with marketing, understand their constraints, and build a prototype together.
And in any modern organization, the person who can act as the translator between those different worlds, between the engineers, the marketers, and the executives, is incredibly valuable.
They become the linchpin.
Exactly. They're almost always the most promotable person in the room.
And doing this builds what the guide calls creative confidence.
Yes, that's a huge part of it.
When you finally stop hiding behind 50-page slide decks detailing what you plan to do, and instead you start building tangible artifacts, even if it's just a messy paper sketch or a low-fidelity digital mock-up, and you actually put it in front of a real human being, something amazing happens. You completely lose the fear of failure.
So freeing.
You realize that fast, messy evidence always beats long, polished debates.
Because you aren't agonizing over finding the singular perfect answer anymore, you realize perfection is an illusion. You are taking immediate action, getting immediate feedback, and iterating. That builds immense, unshakable confidence in your own ability to solve completely ambiguous problems.
Okay, so we always want to leave you, the listener, with a way to take action immediately rather than just absorbing theory. Felix Römer's guide lays out a Start Today action plan with 4 incredibly practical steps you can implement this week.
Yes, these are great.
I am going to challenge you to try at least one of these in your own workflow. Let's walk through them.
The first one is to practice empathy. And do not overcomplicate this. Just schedule 2 or 3 short observation sessions or informal user interviews this week.
Keep it simple.
Watch your colleagues or your customers in their natural environment. Note what they actually do when they struggle, not just what they tell you they do on a survey.
Number 2, build a scrappy prototype. If you have an idea, do not open up an expensive software tool to make it look pretty. Sketch a paper mock-up. Keep it incredibly low fidelity.
You actually want it to look unfinished.
Why is that?
Because if you show someone a polished, beautiful design, they will critique the font choice or the colors. If you show them a messy sketch on a napkin, they will critique the actual core function and reveal the hidden assumptions you didn't even know you had.
That is such a great point. Step 3 is a brilliant framing exercise. Turn your complaints into how might we questions.
Oh, I use this all the time.
If you have a stubborn, recurring pain point in your team, stop admiring the problem. Reframe it. Changing a statement like, our onboarding process is broken, to, how might we redesign the first week so new hires feel instantly connected, instantly shifts the psychological dynamic.
It moves the team from complaining to collaboratively inviting solutions.
And finally, number 4, run a 15-minute idea sprint. Literally set a timer on your phone, put an issue on the table, and force your team to generate ideas until the clock runs out.
The first 3 ideas will be the obvious, boring ones.
Always.
But the artificial constraint of the ticking clock will force the brain to push past the cliches and tap into genuine creativity.
It is all about generating momentum. One quick, messy test in the real world beats one long, theoretical slide deck every single time.
Without a doubt.
I want to leave you with one final thought, building on that incredible story about positive deviance in Vietnam. The massive, complex, seemingly impossible problem of childhood malnutrition wasn't solved by a billion-dollar top-down outsider initiative. It was solved by observing a tiny, hyperlocal behavior shift, adding small shrimp and greens to a daily meal.
It's such a powerful takeaway.
So here's the question for you to mull over as you go back to your day. What is the shrimp and greens solution hiding in plain sight in your own daily workflow, just waiting for you to test it?
It is definitely out there. You just have to start observing.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Smart Keys podcast. We really appreciate you spending your time with us to explore these concepts. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an insight. And if you want to dive even deeper into the specific frameworks we discussed today, I highly encourage you to read Felix Römer's full guide. You can find the direct link to the original article provided right down in our show notes. We will catch you on the next deep dive.